aware of this marijuana solution.
The Marijuana Solution would like to remind you to check out our sponsors after the podcast. We're going to have links to them in the description. Our sponsors are TrueLeaf, Sunshine Cannabis, The Smart Collective, Minorities for Medical Marijuana, and We Are Rare. Don't forget to check out those links in the description, and if you haven't done so already, go ahead and subscribe. Leave us a review.
We're Florida's first licensed medical cannabis dispensary with locations all throughout Florida, and we deliver all throughout Florida next day. We have the largest selection of products within the allowable delivery methods. TrueLeaf products are hand-grown in an environment that keeps it as natural as possible at every turn. We don't use pesticides, and we lab test our products, and those lab tests are published on our website, so you can be confident at the medication that you're putting into your body. Our favorite products are our vaporization lines, our True Pod, our True Clear is a patient favorite, and we also just recently launched True Flower for patients that want the full entourage effect. At TrueLeaf, we're really proud to offer the largest variety to patients, and we're really excited about the future and all of our patients that are helping us expand and grow and make our products even better. Visit our website at www.trueleaf.com to find out where all of our dispensaries are located, shop online, learn more about our products, or find a doctor if you haven't gotten started in the medical cannabis process.
Hello everyone, you're listening to The Marijuana Solution, and I'm your host Robert Roundtree, and this episode we're speaking with Regina Nelson of the ECS Therapy Center. I met Regina through We Are Rare, and she was a speaker speaking about special needs children and how medical cannabis has helped them improve their lives, improve their families' lives, and she is a consummate advocate for patient rights, transparency, travels around the globe, speaking at different conferences, educating people, and we wanted to bring her on today to help give you her knowledge. How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me, Robert.
You're welcome. So could you maybe give us the short version of the Regina Nelson story up to date for our listeners?
Sure. Well, I've been a cannabis user most of my life, but it wasn't until I started looking at entering a PhD program back in around 2010. I was looking to enter an ethics and social justice program at Union Institute University. And I did, and I completed that in 2016, but I went in then looking at this subject of medical marijuana at that time, and hey, was this real? Did it just make you feel better? Is there something really valid to this? And I began just this really incredible journey. I had my own patient story, but as you just mentioned, you came to meet me through the group We Are Rare. And certainly in 2013, when so many children began to become cannabis patients after Dr. Sanjay Gupta portrayed Charlotte Figge's story on the show Weeds on CNN, we had such an influx of people and families, particularly here in Colorado. I became, much more involved in the patient community at that time and really kind of stumbled upon consistent dosing guidelines, working, kind of along with a scientist and looking at animal models and those type things. So over the last few years, I've been out educating about targeted dosing on medical cannabis and sharing a lot of patient stories, including a lot of children's stories, like you've mentioned. Last year, I was touring on my book, The Medical Cannabis Recommendation, looking at which looks at doctor-patient relationships around this and that medical cannabis recommendation process. And this year, with our Plant a Seed for Cannabis Education tour, we'll be actually going around the globe and educating. We're offering some CME accredited classes and Commission Level 1 certification for people who are coming into the industry that kind of gives a real just base for either medical professionals or cannabis professionals who are going to be speaking with patients about this and need just some standard guidelines to utilize. So that's kind of, brings you up to date. Today's news is I've just signed on as the principal investigative researcher for a sexual health and cannabis study. So I've got a pretty diverse and broad background in cannabis.
Excellent. That's interesting that you mentioned that about the sexual health. I saw an article, it was a recent study, I believe last year. I forget who, you may know more, but basically said that people that use cannabis, by and large, have better sex lives.
Well, what they say is they have more sex.
Okay, more
Stanford
sex. Well,
University,
in America,
yeah.
that usually equals better, so we'll go with that.
Yeah, well, and that's kind of the question. You'd think that it means better sex, but what they did is Stanford University looked at a study, a national study that they, give to tens of thousands of Americans, and they really only whittled it down to a couple of questions. Do you use cannabis, and how often do you have sex? And then they did, look at things like, are you a parent, other things like that, and they kind of tried to differentiate. But basically, they showed that on average, cannabis users typically have sex at least once more a week than most other partnered couples. And they did look at partnered heterosexual couples who participated in this. And so while that's interesting, I want to know more. I want to know, are they having better sex? Why are they having better sex? Does it impact, and how does that impact their relationship and their other experiences with cannabis? Because now that we're starting to see sexual health product lines come out that are CBD infused, we're starting to see this really go much more mainstream. And I think we're at a really unique time and place in history to ask consumers about their experiences with this and learn a lot more. And I think that information can really help guide scientists, who are looking at health outcomes.
Oh, 100%. What are some other things that you've seen come out with sexual health? Like, I've seen lube. I've seen stuff for women's reproductive stuff with tampons. Those are really popular. I have seen various things. But what is kind of at the forefront? Because in Florida, we're behind the times.
Yeah, well, but you're ahead of some of the other states.
Ooh,
So,
we are.
you fall somewhere there in the middle. But we're definitely seeing, cannabis infused lubricants on the line. We're seeing candies and capsules and tinctures and vape pens that are being geared towards being an aphrodisiac. And the interesting thing, Robert, you and I, we've been cannabis users for a long time, and I've met with thousands of patients. And, often I get from somebody, hey, did you know this works like an aphrodisiac? And, I think studies have shown that yes, it does, but not all the time. And so I think some of that is dose related. I think some of that is individual. I think the same strain in the same person at different times can have different effects. And certainly, if you're already relaxed and in the mood for lovemaking, adding cannabis to it, most people would say, yes, that's a huge aphrodisiac. But not all people feel that way. So I think, we need to understand more what those parameters are. And as you're talking about lubricants and some of the products that have come on the market for women's health, particularly aimed at helping reduce menstrual cramps and things like this, I anticipate that people that even try a novel, CBD infused lubricant that they are able to get from the group I'm working with here shortly, Rise Life Science, for instance, and try that. They may be trying it because they're starting to experience some health issues and may have a little bit of pain after sex and things like this. But when they start to try it and they find out that improves, they may become more of a regular user of that same type of product. And so what is happening with that? Well, we don't really know. We're not doing human trials on that yet. So the best thing for us to understand is to go to the consumers and to ask them.
Yes, that is correct. And right now, that's left up to all private companies and individuals, except for, there are some university trials on a small scale. How?
There are. And, I just completed a couple, I participated in a couple of cannabis consumption surveys that are online for Arizona State University and for CU Boulder here in Colorado. And we have a piece of that in our in our even our sexual health study, because some people may not be using cannabis other than these products, and some people may be using it in a variety of other ways, and we're trying to, understand that. But, I'm really appreciative of the company that commissioned me to do this study, because they really understand, one, this will help them obviously from a marketing perspective to understand how their products, are being accepted by, being accepted by the public, and, what they can do to tweak them out. But more so, they understand the real value of contributing to the research that's necessary. And, cannabis, we have this vast need. There's just so many huge silos of information that we don't have. And so being able to start and collect anecdotal information is really important. I think, again, will guide science, and I think we'll even move into some clinical trials in the next few years. But I also see it spurring that, again, as people begin to try these products more novelly, they may begin to use them more as a regular health product, and understanding that is really important. And so there are very few companies willing to fund this kind of research. I mean, it's not really cheap to undertake, less expensive than, a full-blown clinical trial, but it's a major commitment of funding that most startups don't do. And so I have a great deal of respect for Rise Life Science, and I think they'll go far, even though we haven't begun looking at their products. Just because I agree with their philosophies, around how they're approaching their consumer base, and they're, seeking information from them. And I think that's really important. And you and I know that cannabis consumers are just chomping at the bit to give some feedback. And so I think this is a really good opportunity for us to understand a lot of various impacts of sexual health and cannabis use. But I also see it, eventually spurring other studies.
The more data that we can collect, the better. And I think you hit it right on the head. Cannabis consumers are ready to give feedback. You see it all over social media all the time, but there's not many channeled places for them to put that feedback. Are those studies that you mentioned that were done online, the consumption studies, are those open to the public?
They are open to the public. They're open to people who are consuming cannabis for medicinal purposes. You should be able to, we found them both on Craigslist. Interestingly enough, it was kind of as I've been doing research on my own project, and my research assistant came across these on Craigslist looking for research participants, and it was just simply click here, agree to participate, and I spent probably 25 to 30 minutes with each survey answering questions about my cannabis consumption. That's all it was about. And particularly, they didn't ask a lot of open-ended questions. And this is one of the things that makes this sexual health and cannabis study that I'm leading very unique. And I've recently had the opportunity to participate in some sexual health conferences. As I've gotten into this, I've come to understand that we also don't do a lot of research around sex. And, unless it's very specifically driven around a women's health issue, maybe around something like HIV or AIDS, but we really don't talk to people about pleasure and sexual, pleasure and enhancement of that. And, so as I've come to understand more about sexual health, and of course I know, quite a lot about cannabis, and a lot of people have talked to me about how it's impacted their sexual health, I'm really excited about this, because what we've done is we've taken some clinically based questions, and we've looked at the female sexual health index and the male sexual health index and the male erectile function index, for instance. And these are 3 of like 15 clinical tools that we'll be using. But instead of just asking those questions and having you rate your experience, at times we're asking you, tell us how you feel about that, or tell us about what your experience with that was, so that we can understand more. And I was really excited when I entered a sexual health conference in San Diego this year, and was not only readily accepted as a cannabis professional in their space, but that they wanted more information, and that they themselves were calling for these clinical studies to include more narrative data from people. And, again, the one thing that I know from being in the cannabis space for a while is people here are really aching to share their voices. I certainly have been as a patient myself. And so, any opportunity I get, I certainly take. And you can follow my Facebook pages and usually catch links to those kind of surveys and studies that are being done by universities, again, kind of on a smaller scale.
And how can people find your Facebook page?
The ECS Therapy Center is at my ECS for endocannabinoid system therapy.org. We can also be reached through my for-profit, which is integraleducationandconsulting.com. And then we're running a special project this year through Signs for the Times that I'd love to talk, or through the ECS Therapy Center that I'd love to talk to you about, Robert. It's called Signs for the Times. And what we've done is we've brought together a team of sign language developers, and they're putting and learning about cannabis and hemp language. And we're going to be doing some training with them this summer, and we're going to be empowering them to develop American Sign Language around this. So that, again, a normalization process, but something that will empower the hearing impaired and our nonverbal children who, when they use cannabis oil, it shouldn't look like a sign for smoking a joint. It should be something unique to that, and it should come out of the hearing impaired world. And so I'm really excited about this project. So people can read about our Plant a Seed for Cannabis Education Tour and access also through signsforthetimes.org.
That's awesome. I mean, people are thinking about the blind or the deaf when it comes to cannabis products. Like, I just wanted to touch on this real quick because it kind of hit a nerve. I have a good friend. His wife is blind. And, until she brought it up, I had never thought about why there's, a good need for haptic feedback on vape pens. She never knows if it's on. Someone has to tell her. All it takes is a little vibration.
Right. And there are some that have just come on the market that when you hit them, if they're on, they vibrate. And I think it's for just that reason. And again, if we wait for the time that, funding can come to state nonprofits and federal nonprofits to do these kind of things, we're going to wait decades. So we've taken, action here. And what we're planning to do, we've actually got an online process going on right now where we have volunteers, scientists to lay people who are helping us develop a text glossary. But that text glossary will eventually be turned into multiple languages and Braille. And it will be available through our community, our pledge partners who come in and help support and help raise funds and awareness around this project. We Are Rare is one of those partners. But as well, we're building up, and we have groups like Rise Life Science, like the Hemp Connoisseur magazine, like Lighter Charms. We've got many, many more that are stepping in. Oklahomans for Health. I wish I had a list right here for you, but you can go to the signsforthetimes.org and you can start to see that we're building founding partnerships. We need to raise some funds to bring this team of certified deaf interpreters into Denver and have them trained and meet with a variety of groups so they understand how this language is used. Because I always give this example. In American Sign Language, there are 19 different signs for the word running. Is the water running? Are you running an errand? Are you running in a marathon? These are all different signs. Well, cannabis is an our words around this are very interactive at times. Words like medicating that are new into this language. And so they need to understand these. So we're going to be bringing them in and putting them through the certified training that we're offering this year during the Plant a Seed for Cannabis Education Tour. It's 4 classes that are CME accredited for medical professionals, but for which we're offering a clinician level 1 certification for people in the industry. And it's 4 classes around communication around medical cannabis. The second is a basis on the introduction to the endocannabinoid system. The third is hemp versus cannabis. What are the real differences? Because they're both good. Let's talk about the benefits of both, but they do differ. And then one is targeted dosing. No matter whether you're using hemp products or cannabis products, we talk about targeted dosing. So it gives everybody a real base. But in addition to that, they'll get to go on some tours. They'll get to meet with physicians and patients and nonprofit leaders and business leaders. So they really understand how this language is used. That glossary will continue to be developed, and then it will be turned into multiple languages and Braille. And all of our pledge partners will have the ability to share these through their own websites and their own resources for free. This is a public service project. But we need help supporting it. So, we're looking for ways to help get the word out. So please help us do that.
I'll help you get the word out. Can do it on podcast and on a couple websites that I have developed.
I knew you would. You would. I appreciate you so much, and your voice in Florida has been so strong. I know you've learned a lot about this industry in the past couple of years since we first met.
And a lot about the legal side.
There's just so much to be done. And so it's really great to have a project where we're working collaboratively with other nonprofits and with businesses. And, we're making some impact there again towards normalizing the use of cannabis.
Absolutely. And earlier you mentioned about if we waited around for things to get the way they need to be through large-scale funding, that we'd be waiting for decades. That's why I think it's important for people, if you do have an idea that you think would be useful in the cannabis space, put it into action and come up with a way to do some of the things that may take decades if we wait. Conduct your own research.
Yep.
Create these community service projects, because it's going to be a while before we get county grants for cannabis education.
So many things. And, there's so many opportunities with a nonprofit like the ECS Therapy Center and with a group like We Are Rare to do internships when you're working on your bachelor's degree or graduate work. I mean, we need interns now across a wide variety of things, including help with research projects. And we're wanting to work with one with We Are Rare. Because we have some really miraculous outcomes in these children with schizencephaly. And I actually have made some connections, and I'm trying to get in touch with Trish because I believe that we have a hospital system that may be willing to bring a small study for kids with schizencephaly who are using medical cannabis so that they can follow their progress. Because, again, we've seen such outstanding MRI results and brain mapping results and things that can't be explained by any other thing but the fact that this child came to cannabis therapy, because nothing else in their routine has changed. And to see that among children who are born, with a malformed brain to begin with, it just puts so much against, this myth that I grew up with that, cannabis kills your brain cells. We are physically seeing the evidence of it being neuroprotective and neurogenerative. And because of this observational evidence, we're now getting, again, hospitals that are interested, that are more willing to take a risk on a very small study for patients who are already using cannabis. And so if we can do that, we can really make some headway. But it's about organizations collaborating together and businesses within the cannabis space coming in to support nonprofits like the ECS Therapy Center and like We Are Rare and Nuvolution and American Cannabis Refugees and so many others, because instead of Susan B. Komen or other groups. And it's because we're doing work in the cannabis space that is benefiting their businesses, even if it's not, even if they don't see it directly now, it's benefiting this long-term industry, and it's normalizing their business into society.
Yeah, I think it's a win-win for everybody.
Absolutely.
And we're starting to see more of that. It's kind of like the snowball effect. As more states come online, more people get involved, you start to see it's like an exponential effect. You mentioned some of the schizencephaly. Can you kind of give my listeners a really quick rundown? And I know you have a story that you usually tell when you do your speeches, but just really quick, before and after.
Yeah, well, and I think, I have several stories now, which is what the really amazing thing is. But schizencephaly, for those who are unaware, is a brain malformation condition. And I have met people, children to adults, who have a wide variety of brain malformation. They may have as much as 75% of a normal brain, and they may have as little as 11% of a normal brain. And I've seen these, and I've met the people who are living with them. Various, wide variety of disability with that. Again, I've met a man through We Are Rare, Paul out of Florida, who I'm going to mention here and give great kudos to, because he was in his 40s before he found out that he had schizencephaly. He thought he had a mild case of cerebral palsy. And he started to seize in his 30s. And when they did the first MRI in his 40s, they came to find out he only has about half a brain. and this was, and otherwise, he's a very functioning adult. He has a job as a computer programmer. And, he's a very intelligent man. But the first child I ever handed cannabis oil to their parents was a little girl with schizencephaly who came from Austin, Texas, who was born with only 24% of her brain. And at the time she came to Colorado in 2013, the doctors, the best neurologists in Texas, wanted to remove half her brain and sever the two because she was having hundreds of seizures a day. And they thought if they could maybe sever the two sides of her brain, maybe it would slow or stop that seizure activity. That's a horrific thing to consider, and it's usually not successful. And there's often, a fatality in surgery or shortly thereafter. Her parents brought her to Colorado and began cannabis oil. And in following her story just the other night, the mother, reiterates she's using a THC-rich oil, and she's taking a very large dose, around probably 10 milligrams per kilo of her little body weight. But her brain has managed to regenerate a pituitary gland that they said never existed. It had never been in previous MRIs. She had no pituitary function. They could only assume she'd never developed a pituitary gland. And yet 10 months into cannabis therapy, she started to have pituitary function response. And now she's off all these pharmaceuticals that supported that because she didn't have that function, and it's functioning normally, and she's often going 7 or 8 months without any seizure activity. And at that time, it's a minor activity. And so that's a hugely dramatic difference, not only to her little life, but to her family's. And, then again, Trisha Dennis, who runs We Are Rare, has very publicly talked about her son Noah and how cannabis therapy has helped him through some major spinal surgeries that have helped him become more cognizant, more vocal. We again see huge medical evidence that Noah's had brain generation, and he has much more brain activity than he had prior to cannabis therapy. And these things are nothing short of miraculous. And I've sat down with Raphael Mechoulam and Vicente DiMarzo and Ethan Russo and some of the greatest scientists in this. And I placed these MRIs in front of their face and said, I need you to help me explain this. And they can't. They know it happens at a cellular level. They know cannabis has these effects, but they've never seen it. They've never been able to study it. We're so far ahead with observational evidence. We are pushing those scientists to do more cellular research because we can't explain why these children have had such profound results. And if they do, being the most vulnerable in our society, don't you think that this is a safe enough drug, given that it's non-toxic, that it should be available throughout our society? And, again, we're pushing the boundaries here, but it's been these little children that often they don't maybe have words, but boy, their voices are loud. And, last year when I attended the We Are Rare conference and they opened with Trisha and one of the moms, Desiree, doing a sign interpretation of a pop song, and looking around the room at the children's faces, I knew that this Signs for the Times project was, just valuable and necessary. And I'm so thrilled that we're getting it off the ground in 2018. And because a lot of these kids are nonverbal and their cannabis oil is not smoked. It may be vaporized from time to time, but typically The main dose is given by oil, and we need to be able to have them communicate and know and be able to talk about their medicine.
Yeah, it would definitely liberate them. And a lot of people, myself included, uh, I mean, that's so out of our wheelhouse that I want to applaud you for taking that on.
Oh, it's out of my wheelhouse
Well,
too.
I
I
mean,
just got people who can bring it together.
just like even thinking about it, just to be honest, it's just something that I don't think a lot of people consider, and it takes a really compassionate person to consider others like that. And I would love to see the day that, like you said, there's more than just a smoking a joint sign to describe cannabis to somebody. It's got to be confusing now that it's being used as medicine. So it all makes sense.
Absolutely. And I'm a social scientist again, and so that's more my ballywick. And the thing that I know is that language changes things and it normalizes things. And we now use the word, we're using cannabis instead of marijuana or pot or weed. And we're going to the name of the plant, and that's normalizing the use, and it's making it much more comfortable in society. And it's things like this. Sign language is the third largest language in the world, and American Sign. We've got this. And I have a volunteer who is an interpreter, and when her husband was diagnosed with cancer, she started to realize how difficult this would be to explain to the people she worked with who couldn't, who were hearing impaired. And because she would have to spell everything out, endocannabinoid system, letter by letter, and then explain to them what that was. And there are signs for nervous system. There's signs for immune system. The endocannabinoid system is over both of these things. So we know that now. So the time is now, and we need to, push that forward. Again, there's millions of cannabis users, and it is about normalizing this, but it's also about giving voice to those who don't have voice. And I think that's the thing that has struck me the most since I became a part of this, because it really doesn't matter what your qualifying condition is. As a medical cannabis patient, if you've gotten to this, it's because you've been sick and you've often become isolated and disempowered, and you get to where you don't feel like your voice it's not worth sharing. So if you begin using cannabis, you don't share that with your doctor, unless you get some really good results and you're one of those people that you'll push back, but still many people don't. And cannabis can be so empowering to so many. And I just, I want to help empower those who do have the skill. And so while we've housed this project under our nonprofit, and you can find information at myecstherapy.org, many nonprofits are going to be needed to come in support of this, and are. And many businesses are going to need to host small fundraisers and help us out online so that we can fund this team. It's about supporting them, and their efforts, and being able to document and record those so that it again can be normalized around the globe.
I can't agree more, and I look forward to seeing it develop and helping raise awareness in any way that I can. Real quick before we go, could you list all those websites again? I know there's myecstherapy.org.
Yep, and then there's signsforthetimes.org. And then you can always reach out for me for consulting or speaking engagements at Integral Education and Consulting.com. And you can find information on our Plant a Seed tour for Cannabis Education tour on any of those websites as well. You can follow us on Facebook. We're going to be all around the United States this year, teaching classes and empowering people to teach others.
Excellent. I know there's still a lot of work left to do for people like you and me and everyone else involved, but things are changing, and every day is a little more hopeful than the last, and This was a great podcast. I'm glad that you brought us up to speed with what's going on, and I'll make sure to have all these descriptions in the link so people can reach out to you and your different organizations if they would like further information.
Great. Thank you so much, and I'll look forward to talking to you again here soon.
Absolutely, Regina. Thank you for taking the time out today and join us on the Marijuana Solution. You have a good day. The Marijuana Solution would like to remind you to check out our sponsors after the podcast. We're going to have links to them in the description. Our sponsors are TrueLeaf, Sunshine Cannabis, The Smart Collective, Minorities for Medical Marijuana, and We Are Rare. Don't forget to check out those links in the description. And if you haven't done so already, go ahead and subscribe. Leave us a review.
Aware of the Marijuana Solution.